Today at shopdap.com, we're going to be talking about coolant lights on Volkswagen and Audi models. Okay, so before we get into specifics, today we're going to be talking about coolant lights. We have a Mark 7 GTI here, but this would apply to all Volkswagen and Audi models and is really a broad video to explain exactly how all this stuff works and kind of the steps that you should take if you do get a coolant light on your vehicle. So on this vehicle, we did get a coolant light recently and it came up on the dash when starting the vehicle. Now when you see that light, the first thing you need to look at is determine whether you indeed do have low coolant or not. So when you are going to look at your system, you can determine whether you have a low coolant level. And then once you do, you can know if you actually have enough coolant or you don't. Now, if you do have proper level, and again, that's checking your coolant bottle for min-max to make sure that it is in line with where it's supposed to be, then you know you have something else going on. Now, if you have coolant in there and it's telling you to check the level, for example, in this vehicle, pretty much all current model Volkswagen Audis would have a level sensor that's in the coolant bottle itself. That tells the vehicle that there's coolant in the vehicle. If it falls below a certain line, it's going to trigger a light, making it believe that there's no coolant in the vehicle. Now, sometimes what happens is those sensors go bad. They're built into the coolant bottle, so it means you need to replace your coolant bottle. Now, alternatives, and very important to understand that if a coolant light comes on and it's not related to the coolant level, if it just says check coolant, or sometimes your default should be whenever you're checking coolant that you have to make sure the vehicle is not overheating. Any coolant light you get, you should check to make sure that the vehicle is not overheating. If it is, you should stop the vehicle immediately. Do not drive a car that's overheating. It can potentially nuke the engine or potentially blow a head gasket or something else. Any car overheating for any extended period of time will cause long-term damage, which means you may end up having to buy an engine if you continue to drive the vehicle. So let's talk about how to check it on this specific vehicle. Okay, so here we are looking at our coolant bottle. We can see that right here is where our coolant level is. Here is our minimum level. Now this is supposed to be set when it's cold. So this vehicle has been running a little bit and is warm, but that's going to be set when you're cold. Now, that's at the minimum, remember. Usually what I like to do is fill obviously above the min, and we're going to open our system. Now it's important to know whenever you're opening your cooling system that if your vehicle's hot, this is going to be pressurized. So you're generally going to want to open it slow. It won't usually bubble over unless there's some serious problems with the car, but it will be something that you should expect to hear a little bit of pressure let off. You heard it there, and that was just a little bit because again, this vehicle is not that hot. It's warm just a little bit. It's pretty cold outside right now. One note I wanted to make is if you do have a low coolant level, you will want to make sure that you don't have an actual leak in the vehicle before you start going down the road of talking about the other things that we're going to discuss in this video. Now, the easiest way to determine if you do have a leak is to get under the vehicle or get in the engine compartment to kind of search everywhere. Always the easiest way to find a coolant leak would be to determine the lowest point in the vehicle, obviously getting under the car to look from there. Volkswagen and Audi, because they use that pink coolant, is actually kind of nice because you can see specific leaks, assuming your leak isn't just a massive leak that is just gushing out of the car and it's just a slow leak. You're generally going to get crystallization of that coolant around the leak point. So you're going to have like kind of a white pinkish crystallization that kind of forms around the point where it's leaking, which is a good indicator to tell you where it's leaking from. Now again, if it is leaking very harshly and a ton, it's just going to be pouring water out, in which case it's generally pretty obvious where it's leaking from. But that is the determining factor before you go forward with the rest of the things we're talking about in this video. You do want to make sure you don't actually have a leak in the vehicle. Now, before we start to fill our coolant, we want to take a look. This is a gallon of Volkswagen coolant. This is G13. This is a concentrate. We will have links to the coolants that we have available in the description below. If you have a concentrated coolant like this one, or we're going to have some other ones that we offer as well, this one specifically needs to be mixed 50-50 with water. So you would take this, fill it, dump half of it out into another container, fill the other, fill it up to the top with water, and then you're mixing 50-50 with water, and you could dump it in. Now, if you're in a pinch and you have a circumstance where you have a low coolant circumstance and you don't have access to G13, do not use something like Dextron, which is something that is kind of an orangey pink color, which would be found for GM vehicles. That is not good. Do not use green phosphorescent coolant. That actually can create problems in Volkswagen and Audi cooling systems. Only use G13. If you cannot use G13, you'd be better off using water temporarily until you can get actual coolant. The only thing that you have to worry about if you're using water in the system is if you dilute your coolant too much, you're not holding it up to the proper antifreeze, which means when it's cold, like it is here now, you can have circumstances where you have freezing. So you do want to make sure that you actually are using coolant and not just water, but using just a little bit to add isn't going to be a big deal, especially if it's not during a very cold season in your particular area. And again, temporarily, it's also not a huge deal. You will want to make sure that your coolant level does not get too low, because if you introduce air into the system, meaning it gets so low that you have air start coming in, you can actually have issues with overheating. So something to be aware of. Now let's show filling our coolant. Now, as we fill up our coolant, you're going to want to take a look and watch that level as it comes up. And we're going to filter right there, and we should be all set with our level. Now that we've filled our coolant, we are all set on this vehicle. If you have indeed solved your issue with filling your coolant up like that, you will no longer have that light come on when you turn the ignition on, and everything is fine. If you still have that light coming on, you have to look again. If it is a level light that's telling you having an issue with your level, it's probably the level sensor in the bottle. If you have other lights like that coming on and the vehicle is overheating, make sure that's not the case, or potentially use something, a scan tool like an OBDeleven, which we'll link to in the description, to allow you to check the faults to see if you have maybe something related to coolant temp sensor faults or something of that nature. Thank you so much for watching our video on Volkswagen and Audi cooling systems. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more like this.